Anna from Bright Lane Gardens. We're doing another native plant video, but today we're going to talk about some shade-friendly native varieties. Specifically, I want to talk about those areas with morning shade. If you live in an area like we do up here in northern Michigan, then you likely experience a lot of morning shade, especially if you're surrounded by a wood line like we are here on the Bright Lane Gardens property. This, of course, comes with a lot of morning shade, and some plants, they just can only bloom with that morning sun. So today I want to talk about a couple varieties that are prolific bloomers even in full morning shade. First on my list, I am going to start with my absolute favorite, and that is my Canada anemone. This guy is currently in bloom. You can see these delicate, very pretty little white flowers on the top. He can handle partial shade, especially in those morning hours, and really only needs a couple hours of sunshine in the afternoon to reach his full blooming potential. Canada anemones do stay a little bit shorter, about 12 inches tall at their maturity. This makes them excellent candidates to be under the canopy of other plants, such as a larger shrub or maybe a small tree. These guys make a really nice addition for some of that under canopy landscaping. Canada anemone is going to be one of your earliest bloomers, typically blooming between May and June. Oftentimes, this is my very first native plant that I see in bloom right after my bulbs finish up, so it's one of my favorite spring flowers. Canada anemones can also handle wet soil. I have them planted along a couple of my ponds on the property, and I frequently see them pop up in marshy areas that have a lot of standing water. This wet soil tolerance really increases the versatility of this plant and makes it a viable option for various areas of your property. Wild columbine is a local favorite. The number of customers that we have that come to us asking for wild columbine is probably second to none. Columbine is an excellent self-seeder, so you might have noticed it in your yard whether you planted it or not. This columbine is not in bloom quite yet, but when planted in the ground, these guys will usually bloom for all of April, May, and June, making them a long-standing prolific bloomer. Oftentimes, these will grow up to about 2 feet tall. Typically, the blooms will shoot above the foliage by just a couple inches, which just emphasizes those blooms and makes them even more noticeable. The blooms themselves are yellow and red rocket ship shaped blooms. When they're in full bloom on a mature plant, it literally looks like you have your own personal fireworks show happening in your backyard. The self-seeding capability of wild columbine does also make them an excellent option if you're looking to cover a larger area. If you pop these guys out in a meadow, they will oftentimes self-seed so prolifically in the first couple years that it will look like you purchased 3 times as many plants as you actually did. That makes them a little bit more bang for your buck when it comes to filling out a larger space. Spiderwort is one of my favorite shade-friendly recommendations to offer to customers. I just love these little purple-blue flowers, and on a mature plant, you will see a huge cluster of these flowers. It was definitely one of those plants at the very beginning of my native plant journey that I was like, wow, I'm so impressed that that is actually a native plant because it is such a prolific bloomer. These guys do grow in clusters. This plant's only about a year old, but by next year, his cluster will fill out significantly, even coming close to filling out this container. These spread through the same mechanisms that a wild strawberry spreads through, which is called a stolon, S-T-O-L-O-N. That makes it a little easier for these guys to spread, but they do stay in that clump formation. Spiderwort can also self-seed, so if you do stick it in an area along a lakeshore or any area where it's happy, you'll notice some offspring coming up further away from your plant. Those actually spread by seed and not through those underground stolons. Spiderwort is such a fun option for any shady areas of your yard. It doesn't take a whole lot to make these guys happy, and overall routine maintenance is low. New England asters are a very popular option when it comes to shade-friendly native plants. These look very similar to your classic mums, and they grow in a similar fashion, although much, much taller. So reaching heights of up to 3.5, even 4 feet sometimes. Your New England asters are going to be your late bloomers, typically starting in August and going all the way through that first frost in October. These are awesome options if you really love that fall time in your landscape. You don't want to miss out on the opportunity to plant your New England asters. Despite the prolific height on these asters, you can use a method called the Chelsea chop to help reduce the height and increase the number of blooms that you have on each plant. What the Chelsea chop is you'll come through typically sometime between Mother's Day and Father's Day, so early June, and you'll go ahead and cut your plant back about 3 inches from the ground. So on this guy here, I'd probably make my snip right here. And what that does is it brings the height of the plant down. Right where you cut that plant, it will actually fork and produce two stems from there, and you'll get flowers from each of those stems. So it can effectively double the number of blooms that you have on each of your plants, as well as bringing the overall height of that plant down. So you have a nice, tidy, finished looking plant. If you keep a neater looking landscape, this might be a good method for you to carry some of these taller plants in your landscaping. Last but certainly not least is a regional favorite. This is sweet Joe Pye weed. And despite the name being a little iffy, this is an absolutely stunning flower, featuring bold clusters of beautiful blooms at the very top. This is another plant that does end up being a little bit taller, typically around the 3-foot mark, but you can use the Chelsea chop method on your sweet Joe Pye weed as well, which would effectively bring the height down a little closer to that 2-foot mark, and of course will double your blooms. Joe Pye weed is a pollinator haven. You wouldn't believe the number of butterflies, moths, and bees that we see come to our Joe Pye weed. They absolutely love the sweet nectar, and that bold pink color really seems to attract a lot of our local butterflies as well. Sweet Joe Pye weed does a great job in partial shade. It can absolutely handle that morning shade and really only needs a few hours of afternoon sun to successfully bloom to its full potential. Sweet Joe Pye weed can make an excellent choice for the backside of your gardens. Typically, we'll start with our lowest plants or our ground cover first. We'll do some of our medium height 12 to 18-inch plants in the middle, and at the very back, we love to frame it out with some of our taller plants like the Sweet Joe Pye weed. Sweet Joe Pye weed grows very well in the climate conditions that we have here in northern Michigan. It loves our sandy, loamy soil and of course all of the precipitation that we tend to get in the spring and fall months. This plant will spread, although not quickly enough to take over your flower bed, but it can do a really nice job of filling in a certain area if you just have a few plants to work with. If you are working with a shadier area of your yard, do not resign yourself to grasses and ferns alone. There are a plethora of blooming native flower options that will add a lovely pop of color to any area that you're looking at. Conversely, if there were any of the plants that you saw today that you really want to plant in your yard, but you're currently receiving full sun, consider creating your own shade with a tree, a larger shrub, or even a wall of taller herbaceous perennials. Utilizing plants like this to create shady conditions can really help increase the variety of plants that you're capable of growing on your own property. For example, if you have full sun and would like to plant a couple big blue stem grass patches, these guys can reach heights of up to 6 feet tall, which would of course cast a decent shady shadow so that you could grow another plant that prefers shade like spiderwort. We love to work with our clients and customers on creating different conditions in your property so that you can increase the variety and diversity of plants that you have. Of course, increasing the diversity of native plants that we grow on our properties increases their benefits tenfold. Landscaping with native plants is an immensely fulfilling process that can sometimes take years to design, but a lifetime to enjoy. We love talking about all things native plants here, and we have so many more native plant videos coming up, including selecting the right native plants for certain areas of your yard. If this is the type of content that interests you, please take the time to like and subscribe to our channel and set up your alerts so that you know when the next video launches. As always, I sure do appreciate you taking the time on our channel. It helps out small businesses like ours so much. Thank you for tuning in with us today, and I sure hope to catch you next time. Bye-bye.